Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Zach with GDC LLC, and we are continuing the series today with episode 3. It is going to be about budgeting, and this is in the series of how to start and run your construction company and how to be a manager of that company. And so today we're going to dive deep into budgeting. How do you build a budget? What are some of the elements of the budget? And ultimately what the budget then leads to, which is hopefully a project and then fulfilling that project. And within fulfilling that project, you're going to be referring back to the budget throughout that whole process. So I would like to start off with just reminding about the previous videos. And so the first video was kind of an overall view of what is within running your construction business. And the second video was on scheduling, on what elements you need to take care of to have a successful project on the side of scheduling. Go back to those videos and look at that if you're interested in trying to get on top of how you schedule and keep on top of your schedule in your construction project. So today is going to be episode number 3 on budgeting, and I'd like to begin this episode talking about the structure. So you can build your budget in many different ways, and a lot of different companies do it in different ways, but I've kind of boiled it down into 3 separate structures for this video. And so the first structure that we can talk about is cost plus. The second one is a fixed bid. And then the third one is going to be T&M. And so I'll give you a brief overview of each 3 of those before we begin. The first one, cost plus. So that's if you're going to go to a client and you're offering a service. Let's say you're a general contractor and you're going to be giving the client a project at cost plus your markup. So everything that you get, if it's materials, if it's subcontractors, if it's in-house labor, you're going to be giving them that price that you get, and then you're going to put a markup on it. And you can do whatever markup you want. And depending on your size of your company and your overhead and all those things, that percentage can vary quite dramatically. Some people go from like 15 to 20%. I've worked for contractors that do 40% markup, and I'm sure there's even more than that too, depending on the level and scale of the business. But that's the basic overview of cost plus, is delivering the cost to a client and putting your markup, which is the plus. The next one is a fixed bid. And the fixed bid, the fixed bid is when you're going to go into a project, you're going to try to hone in on every little detail, every little aspect of the project. Try to form it to where you don't have any change orders in mind throughout the project, and you're going to come up with a number. If it's $50,000, if it's $1.6 million, whatever it is. But you're giving the client that number, and that's what they're going to sign the contract to. And then anything that goes outside the bounds of that contract would be a change order. And so then you'd have to write up a new proposal for the extra work and do it. You could change it halfway through too, depending on what the change order is. But let's just stick in the paradigm of fixed price. And then the change order would also be fixed price. So you would say, hey, I need to repair or I need to build an extra wall or something here. This is how much it's going to cost. And they sign it off and you take care of it. The third one is T&M, which stands for time and materials. So you charge the client labor price for time. So if it's $100 an hour that you're charging, and then the materials, whatever the materials cost. And that usually is a good way to approach like rot or something that has a lot of elements that you just don't know until you start getting into the project. Time and materials can be a little bit tough to work within as well, because you can't just rack up all this time and then the client be expected to pay it. You have to kind of still give them a general range of what the price is going to be, but it at least opens the door for you to be like, hey, we thought it was going to take us 8 hours, but we ran into this and this, and it ended up taking us 15 hours. This is what the price is. So that works really good, like I said, if it's like some hidden knowledge that you don't have on a particular part of a project. I wouldn't say that you should do T&M on an entire kitchen remodel or something. That'd be kind of crazy, because there's so much time that if you have to track every last minute or every last hour and you have to relay that to the client, it could be really difficult to be like, oh, well, we drove to the store today, that took this many hours, then we came back, then we did this little amount of work, and then we waited for a supplier. Like, you just have to explain yourself in such detail if you get a client that wants explanation. So I would urge you to keep the T&M probably to minimal price range. It could expand if it's like rot or something, but in most scenarios it's probably best off to just keep it at like a low couple $1,000s or something like that. But to go a little bit deeper into each one, so the cost plus is a really good way you're selling yourself to the client. So they came to you, if it's through Google or a referral or whatever it was, and they found you and said, I just really want to work with this person. They do phenomenal work. The reviews, everybody raves about the work that they do, and I just want to work with you. And you can approach them then and say, well, this is what it costs to work with me, is I will take everything that's needed for your project and I will deliver that to you with a markup on it, and it's going to take what it's going to take. If we're doing some intricate trim detail that is 5 different layers to it or whatever, you can approach it better and be like, this is for us to give you this product that you're looking for. This is how long it took. And if you're working with a client that already really wants to work with you, it's a lot easier to sell them on that, because they're going to be totally understanding. And you have to be extremely transparent with everything, so that you can justify everything that you're making them pay for. So all of the invoices that you get, or the estimates that you get, and every breakdown of all the costs and putting a markup on it, they have to understand every layer of that. And so it works really well with like big projects. If you just have a massive project that you think you encapsulated every aspect of that project, but there's just some elements that you're like, oh, we're really just not going to know them until we get into them. Here's like a baseline price to it, but the price can change, and the people know that going into it. And the weekly meetings that you're hopefully having with your clients, you'll be able to discuss that with them on a weekly basis and be like, hey, we're digging into this. This is what's happening. We're still within budget, so everything's good. Or you can steer the conversation in another direction that's like, hey, we're starting to get close to the end of that budget for whatever detail for installing plaster. It's going to be a little bit more, and this is the reasons why, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I would definitely recommend looking more into Cost Plus and maybe implementing that into your business. It's worked very well for me in the past, and it works for a lot of contractors. So the fixed bid is also a really good way to approach a project as well, because you kind of just deliver the number to the client right away. People are shopping, they're fishing for prices, and if you're able to give them a fixed price, like, hey, this is what it's going to cost for us to do it, they can take a deep breath and be like, all right, like, at least you're bringing the reality to me right away. And that's really good for selling a project, because people will see it and be like, all right, $500,000. Okay, this is what it's going to take. I can do that. This is within the budget that I have. Let's go forward. But there is some downsides to the fixed price as well, or the fixed bid, is that if anything changes within the project, you got to get a change order because it's not within the scope. Or you have to go to the client and say, hey, this is not part of the scope of work. We're not going to be doing this, but we can do this if you want us to, and it's just going to cost X amount of money for us to do this. And you need to approach that through every aspect of the project, which can be pretty overwhelming at times because you might run into a lot of things like people forgot to do, or they wanted to get new accessories or they wanted new shelving, or they wanted this or that. And they're developing it along the process of the project, and you can rack up 100 different change orders at the end of the project, and their $500,000 fixed bid price just went up to $750,000. And then at the end of the project, there is the potential for them to be like, feel like it was kind of disingenuous of you to give them that price when it really wasn't even a reality. But there's ways around that, and it's having structures in place to where you can talk to your clients and walk them through every aspect of the project and take the time to really decipher every last thing that they want on this project. But that takes a lot of pre-construction, and some people aren't willing to pay for that, even though it's a very necessary detail to construction work, is to sit down with the designers, the architects, the contractors, bring the project to an actual vision and reality. And at that point is when you can make a pretty good assessment of what the fixed bid price is going to be. As long as you know your numbers and you've been doing this for long enough, you can give them a pretty accurate price that's not going to be too far out of the realm of what they're actually going to be paying. And then time and materials, I don't think I need to elaborate too much more on that. It's really just as easy as it sounds. It's just, we're going to bill you at the time it takes to do something, and then we're going to bill you for all the materials it takes to do it. So I don't think it's needed to go any deeper on that level, but I would like to now step from the structures of your business into the structures of your budget into how you actually create the budget. So now you've picked one of those structures. You got either cost plus, fixed bid, or T&M. Well, what do you do with that now? So the next thing that you're going to want to do is create line items, or what we like to call cost codes. And you're going to break that down into every single line item or cost code that you can think up. So it can be general conditions, which is like things that need to happen regardless of what the project is, like your permits, your toilet, your dumpsters, your management, whatever, hazmat, things like that. All those are things that are necessary to even do the project. There's no negotiating that. It's like we can't remove one of these things from the project, really. I guess in some circumstances you could, but the general requirements are really this is just general. This is what it takes to do a project. And then you'll go down the line and you'll be like, all right, the easiest way to do it is to actually think of the steps it takes to produce the project, and that's going to be your line items. Now, you don't have to get super nitty gritty if you don't want to in the beginning, but the more that you develop those cost codes, the better results you're going to have. So let's even say your next one is going to be like demo. Well, there's all different forms of demo. There's like just general demolition of like a whole structure, and that involves like heavy machinery. You can wrap in just like demo as in you're demoing just the walls in a bathroom. You're ripping out the plaster and the tile and all that. And then there's like a surgical demo that I like to call demo, where it's like you're cutting the plaster only so far, and you're landing it right on a stud so a new plaster board can go on there. And a hardwood floor, you're you're demoing just select pieces of a floor. It's very just like fine, detailed demolition. And I'm sure there's way more on the list that you could think of. But if you just did demo and put a price point of that, and you thought it up in your mind, like this is what it's going to cost to demo this space. But then when you got into the project, you're like, well, I got to bring in an excavation crew. I got to bring in a trash removal company. I got to have my in-house laborers surgically demoing these things. You can see how it can get kind of, the numbers can get kind of lost. Whereas if you just break them all down individually, you know it. It's right there. The client can see it. You can see it. You can refer back to it. So when the project's actually happening, you can be like, all right, I have $10,000 for the excavators to come in and demo this garage or whatever and haul all the materials out. And then we're also doing their kitchen, and I need to bring a demo crew in there to remove the kitchen. Well, there's a cost for that. And then I'm going to bring my in-house labor to come and do all the little nitty-gritty stuff, and there's a cost for that. So you have it broken down into these little line items. And like I said, the main reason for this ultimately is, I think, in-house. It's for you to refer back to so that you have more ammunition when you're approaching a client. If you need more money, you can refer back to the budget and say, hey, the excavator was charging $10,000. They had to do this, this, and this, which actually made it cost $12,000. If you want us to do this, this, and this, we got to get that extra $2,000. And so you can put a change order in, or if you're doing the cost plus, like I said, it's just the cost plus your markup. So it's just a conversation you have to have. Be like, hey, we're going to do this. It's a little bit extra, but it's a necessary thing that needs to happen. And then you can just take that same simple idea there and just multiply that by all the different things throughout this project. If it's plumbing, electric, carpentry, roofing. But if you're just starting out and you just want to start creating this structure and selling jobs this way, then you could just start off with like just basic line items like demolition, electrical, plumbing, and not have to get deeper into the cost codes of each individual one. But as you'll see is, like I mentioned before, it does get kind of lost. So I'm sure once you implement this, you're going to want to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and just eventually you'll have a whole list of all these things. It's a good way also to, when you're selling a job to a client and you are still in the discussions phase, that you can actually ask them questions right there. Be like, hey, here's my whole list of a project. This is usually what it takes to produce a project like this. Like, is this something you're interested in doing? Is this something? And you can have conversations and go down that whole list and say, oh, no, we're not doing any windows on this project. Okay, well, we're going to cross the windows off. Hopefully you can see where I'm coming at with that. And that's going to create an entire budget for you. And at the end of all those line items, then you'll have a price. And you can deliver that price to the client. Now there is markups and all those things that you can do to that. So that can be another part. It can be another column or something on your budget. Have all the pricing budgeted out, and then have a markup and have that final number come out of that and then totaled out at the end so the client can see actually what they're paying. So you've built the structure of what you want to make this project. You've created all the line items for every aspect of this project. Well, now how do you get the numbers? Well, a lot of the times you already have a bunch of subcontractors that you're working with. Hopefully you have relationships with these people, and you just call up Jim and say, hey, I need you to come look at this project that we're trying to do. I need to get a price from you. Can we do it on Friday? Okay, great. Hang up. That works great a lot of the times. Sometimes, though, you have maybe a project is out of the realm of what let's just use electrician, for example. The electrician you usually use, maybe it's out of the realm of their ability. Like maybe they only have 2 guys working for them and it's a whole apartment complex. Like obviously 2 guys are not going to wire a brand new apartment complex. So if you're getting approached by a project that you've never done before, that's bigger than something you've ever done before, what you're going to need to do then is actually go out and find contractors that can fulfill the scope of work for that new project that you want. And what you can do is send out some RFIs, which are requests for information. And that's basically just asking general stuff from a subcontractor, like, hey, what's your schedule like? How much work are you doing? What is your capabilities? Do you have a fleet of vehicles? Like just general stuff to be like, hey, can you fill out this form for me just so that I can see if we're even going to be able to work together? Because the last thing you want to do is waste your own time, but respectfully, you don't want to also waste other people's time. So if you're just calling up Joe Schmo electrician and being like, hey, I found you on Google, like, hey, you want to come look at a project? And then he shows up and you start asking him these questions and he's like, I can't handle a project like this. Then you just wasted everybody's time. So if you send out just an RFI to these people, they can at least like right away be like yes or no. It's a yes or no. You can get yes, you can work for me, or no, you can't. So you'll send that out. You'll find some subcontractors that are actually willing to work with you, that are capable of doing the project, and then they're going to give you a price. And sometimes if you're not actually reaching out to new subcontractors, you might be working with someone for years and be like, they always treat me well with pricing, like this is just what it's going to be. But if you're starting to bring in other subcontractors and people you've never met before, that you've never worked with before, then you're going to want to actually start comparing these prices against each other. So Joe Schmo comes over and he's like, hey, this is going to cost me $40,000. And you're like, all right, sounds good. He broke everything down just like I told you how we would break down our budget. He did the same thing. He broke it down for you. And then Jim, that you've worked with forever, comes over and he's like, all right, this is my price. And it's $75,000. And let's just take those 2 examples, and you're sitting there and you're like, whoa, what is the difference? How is this such a dramatic difference? I mean, $35,000 difference. At that point, you might be like, maybe somebody's missing something here. So then you compare your scope of work of what everything the electrician's doing to Jim's scope of work and his budget, and to Joe Schmo's scope of work and budget. And you might see something that doesn't line up. Like maybe Joe Schmo forgot that he's doing a whole new service on the house, and that's why his pricing is so much less. That happens a lot of the times. People come in, they look at projects, they don't take accurate notes, and then they send you something a couple days later and it's missing some stuff. That just happens all the time. So it's a really good way. It's a good way to see how professional somebody is, but it's also a good way to be like, hey, you actually just missed this one thing that we were talking about, and can you just add it to the list, and then compare again the pricing and be like, hey, I really want to work with Joe Schmo, but I don't want him to be underselling himself, or Jim is just like trying to take advantage of me and he's charging way too much money. Maybe he doesn't want to work with me. So it's a good way to just hone in on what that cost is going to be. And then ultimately you can input that into your budget for electrical. There's the number, there's your markup after it. Boom, you have one of these line items crossed off your list on building this project's budget. And I think there needs to be something built in, and a lot of companies do this, where at the bottom of like a budget or a contract, it will say that this only holds for X amount of time. So maybe that's something good that you might want to ask your subcontractors, to be like, hey, how long is this pricing going to hold for? And they're like, oh, it's good for 6 months, it's good for 90 days, whatever it is. And then you at least have something that's locked in. because the last thing you want to do is pick a subcontractor and have them agree to a price, and then you build your whole budget around that price, and then all of a sudden, very last minute, they're like trying to change things up on you. And you can have documentation, show it to them, and be like, hey, you did say this was good for 90 days. Well, the project sold. You are the contractor we picked within the 90-day period. So I would like it if you honored this price. And sometimes this is the industry that we're in. It's that people will get frustrated or whatever, but it's as long as you have those paper trails and you're able to just really hold people accountable for the things that they're putting on their work and their contracts, then there's nothing they can really do. And it's just a learning lesson for them in the future that it's like, hey, maybe you need to update your contract. Maybe you need to make better estimates if that's the case. So you've got your structure, you've got your budget built, you've acquired your subcontractors, you've gotten your pricing, your markups built into the budget. And let's talk a little bit about the markup. So like I talked about before, in a cost plus scenario, people will pick a percentage that they want to mark up on everything that's getting done. Well, that sounds simple enough. It's like, hey, this is the price, boom, 15%. On top of that is what I'm making. But I feel like that's not one of the most efficient ways that you can handle your markup. You can do it in a better way where you'll make more money from it, and it's going to protect you in the long run, because the markups are a necessary thing to do. There's so many things that subcontractors, if you just take their price and don't mark it up, then everything that they do during the project and everything that results from after the project is on you, because you're the general contractor. So if you don't have a bank of money, then you're just doing all that for free. And we're not in the business of doing stuff for free. So that gives you a bank, but then it also leads you to your gross profit goals. And ultimately, that's what we're all trying to do, is reach a gross profit goal. Whatever it may be for your business, you're not going to be able to reach that if you are not adding money to the contract. We're not just here to be a middleman and facilitate something and make very minimal money off of it. No, there's a lot of risk involved in this. This is a very difficult business to be in, and it's for the people that succeed in this business, they make a lot of money, and rightfully so, because it's a very difficult business to be in. There's so much risk. People's lives are at stake in this business. People die every day in this industry. So if you're properly getting paid for your work, then you're going to properly do the work, is the way that I look at it. And so you can mark up the subcontractors, and you can pick what you want with that. Let's say it's 15%. You mark up the subcontractors, and then you have like materials, for example. You want to mark those up as well. Well, maybe you don't want to mark them up as much as the 15%. You only want to mark them up like 10%, because there really isn't a lot of risk that comes with the materials. You're acquiring a item, a thing, and you're installing it. Well, who's ever installing it, you should have a markup on the person installing it. But you don't have to go crazy with the markup on that thing. But it does protect you as well, because a lot of the times materials change in pricing over time. You might get materials that come up broken or ineffective to use, and you have to go track down and acquire other materials, and that takes time, and time is money. And so if you're taking time to figure out something wrong with materials, then there should be money in there for you to deal with that, because it's not as easy to acquire that. And so and then it also it's also a kickback too, because when you work with your suppliers of those materials, they usually give you contractor pricing, so you get a little bit of a cheaper price. You're marking it up, which is bringing it back to that price it was. So if the homeowner went and purchased that item themselves, it would have cost that exact same price anyways. but you've built relationships with your suppliers to where they give you a better price, and you're marking up that and bringing it back to that normal price is probably a good way to look at it, because that, and a good way to actually explain it to the client too, and say, hey, we're not changing the price here. You can, if you went out and bought those materials yourself, it'd be the same price. We're just getting a markup on it because we get a better pricing. And I think most people would understand that. They'd be like, okay, that makes sense. And then you can talk to them about that and say, hey, there's a lot that's involved in materials, and we just need to protect ourselves and have time that's devoted to materials and putting the right materials in your house. We don't want to get something that is broken, defective or broken, and just be like, oh, I don't want to deal with this, and throw it in anyways. No, we want to take the time that says, hey, let's call the supplier, let's figure out a date that we can get a new one, or whatever the lead time is on it, and let's put the right one in, and let's figure it out. So you need to structure it in a way to where you are protecting yourself is ultimately what I want to get down to. But so now you've figured that out, you got everything, you got the budget built, and so you deliver it to the customer, they approve it, everything's good, you're going to do the project for them, everybody's happy. Well, so what results from having a good structured budget? Well, now you've started the project, and you're 1 month into the project, and you're having some contention with pricing, like the contractor is bringing something up to you, the materials are costing more. Well, you can refer back to that budget that you had. So, Jim Bob, you charged me $45,000 for electrical. I have your scope of work here. I have your signed contract here. What's the issue? Why are you asking me for more money? Or why, maybe not even asking, why are you invoicing me for more money? That's even worse, is when they finish their work and you get an invoice and it's like $50,000 and you're like, whoa. We agreed on this for the budget. It's $45,000. What happened here? And if they said, well, I had to do this, and you should, at that point, then you have the ammunition to be like, well, that wasn't in your scope of work and wasn't in my scope of work, so why'd you do it? Well, I had to. Well, okay, if you had to, then why didn't you bring it up to anybody before you performed that scope of work? Now that we're after the fact, we can't pay you for that. You just did all that work for free. So it arms you that you always have something to refer back to. And we're not trying to be mean or anything, but there's a certain way that things are done in this industry, and you can't go around them or maneuver them, or you're going to get burned. And because the subcontractors will do the same thing to you. You'll see it. I'm sure you've already dealt with it if you're a contractor right now. It's people maybe unintentionally burn each other. It just happens. But the way that you protect yourself is just having everything out in the open and transparent. And so you can refer back for that. You can refer back to project to the end of the project. So let's say for framing, you're halfway through the framing stage and you had X amount of money, you had $10,000 for framing, and you're doing it in-house, so it's your own labor. Well, you're talking to your guys and you're like, hey, how many more days is this going to take you? And let's say it was 5 days is halfway, so they already spent $5,000, and they're like, it's going to take me 7 more days to do this. And you're like, at that point, you can be like, whoa, okay, what's happening here? Did we do more work than we were supposed to do? Are we just moving slower than what we thought, and we're just not fitting into that budget? What's going on here? And if you catch that halfway, and you're doing a forward-looking progress report for your budget, you can then bring that to the client and say, hey, this is what's going on. We have this much in the budget for framing. It's looking like there was just a lot more like broken pieces or scabbed together work that we just honestly cannot have our name on, that we're having to fix. We're having to level things and plumb the walls and strap everything, and it's just ending up to be a little bit more than what we thought. It's just going to be another $2,000, and hopefully you're able to sell it then at that point. But you always have that to refer back to. And so that future looking report is usually called a work in progress report or a WIP report. And they are super beneficial. You can take your budget and your cost and the future projection and the total costs of the project, and you can look at everything in real time and see, are we going to project out to be hitting our numbers on this, or is this looking good? Oh, the trash disposal, we already used 3 dumpsters, and like that's all we only have 2 more left, and I can envision out to the end of the project we're going to be using 4 more dumpsters. Okay, well then let's have a conversation. We're going to need to add more money to the budget for dumpsters. And so if you have that budget to refer back to, you have the future looking progress report to use, then you can better have an outcome where you're going to be meeting your gross profit goals. Because you're never going to meet your profit goals if you aren't constantly hovering and tracking your projects. It's just not going to happen, because money slips through the cracks so easily. I just had the other day, back on the concept of trash disposal, they charged me a whole extra dumpster. And when I was doing my progress report, I looked back and said, oh my God, there's an extra $1,000 that they charged us. So, and they credited it back and everything was good. But I potentially would have never even noticed that if I didn't have everything tracked to where I can find those minor discrepancies. $1,000 here, $800 here, $2,000 there. At the end of the project, it totally crushes your gross profit goals. And so I urge all of you to not only build your budget the way that I kind of broke it down here in this video, but to constantly hover and look over your budget and track it and create those progress reports and future outlooks on the project, and track those future outlooks, because that's the way that you're going to have a successful and very profitable business. You're not always going to win the conversations with your clients. Sometimes you cannot justify getting more money from them, and that's just going to happen. But more often than not, if you catch it in advance, you're going to be able to convince them to put more money into the project, because it's needed, and we're all not here to do work for free. It's unfortunate that we all can't see every last detail of a project and break the price down to the last penny, but that's a fact of this industry, is that people are not capable of doing that. It's impossible to have a perfect planned project budget, especially when you're doing a gigantic project. And what most people do is they just let it go. They say, I'll catch it on the next one. I just missed that. And no, that's not the way that you should be doing business. Is you got to be able to know that your mistakes when you were creating this budget and be able to have conversations of how to fix it. And so, like I said, I urge you to build this structure, follow it throughout the project, have the conversations that you need to have, and then at that point you can meet your gross profit goals and have happy clients and have more people coming back to you. So I would just like to wrap it up here. Thanks for all of you that are watching. Please hit the like button and share it, and subscribe to the channel. I'm really trying to build this series here, and would like to move into doing some like live stream Q&A type of things, more of like a formal sitting at a desk with a computer and being able to show more stats and details. But the only way that I'm going to be able to get there is if I have support from people like you to keep me going. So like I said, just like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you on the next one.